her.
Recording has started.
I remembered all by myself. This is a red letter
Well
day.
done, well done. Well, so this is kind of a different session. I mean, yet last time was a different session as well. Well, first of all, did we already pop up the intro?
Oh, I did not.
Okay.
I was busy getting coffee.
I have my...
You know me.
Um,
Priorities.
All right, while you pop that up, I will just sort of go over what we're going to go over today.
All right, there's the sign in.
There we go. Okay, so today is a review day and a question and workshopping day. So Vicki and I are just going to very briefly go over what we have already gone over so that you have reference points, and as questions pop up, as we go over them, you'll know. Really, we're not going to spend very much time on this at all. We're basically just going to run through like the table of contents from each of the last sort of 4 or 5 sessions that had content.
We're going to zip right through them.
And the point of it, the reason we're going so quickly, is because we want you to ask questions and workshop with us in group how your final delivery is going to go. And so we want that to be the most elevated, the most practiced, the most compelling version of your story. We also want that to happen in the time slot allotted, and we want that to happen in front of your boss. No big.
No pressure.
So now you've had numerous opportunities to practice this, but that doesn't mean that everything has to be exactly the same every time. And for those of you who have, or actually for everyone, you've evolved your speech into something more compelling, something that connects to aspirations, something that has colorful words, and something that, that tells us a little bit about yourself. You can connect to the audience. So, so that's before we begin on that review and on questions and on workshopping, what questions do you have?
I have a question. I was going to say I have a pregunta. I have both. Can we, because my presentation that I'm going to be, because of my talk that I'm going to be presenting is with the Women's Caucus and it's about my art, can I share a few photos during my talk? Because that will be part of during the final, because that will be part of the actual presentation.
I hadn't thought about that. I thought that we what did we just, we think we said yes if you can, were you going to hold them up or did you want to screen share them?
I would share my screen.
Or what I could. You guys tell me, can I, how do I make it so she can share her screen on Blue Jeans?
I mean, what I could also do is like, I could send you I'll just do like 2 photos. And I could send them to you. And then when I say, I'll give you like a keyword and then or a time, and then you can just throw it in there. And then the other one will be later. One will be earlier on and one will be later on.
Oh, we can do that. I don't mind doing that. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I do remember we did talk about that. And I think we said yes. So
yes, it shows here that I can uncheck a thing here that will give you screen share things, but whatever you prefer. I hate ceding that kind of power, but not everyone is that way.
Okay, I don't mind. I also want it to be like sensitive to the group and not be like the only one that's sharing. So if others aren't sharing, then I, just wanted to throw that out there. It's okay if I don't. People can use their imagination, or I can share whatever everybody feels comfortable with.
I, for one, am looking forward to seeing your art.
And I want to say it's okay to stand out. So
yeah.
Thanks.
And if it makes you better, I already shared a photo and asked for forgiveness rather than permission. So
that's right.
But it was really hard to share. I ended up just emailing it to the group because I couldn't upload it to the chat, and I hadn't planned it ahead of time. So
yeah, it was a cool photo though when I did finally see it.
Great. Thank you very much. That's my only question for now.
Good. Okay.
Vicki, is there a way to allow us to like upload a photo file to the chat. I don't know if that was one of the boxes that you could tick or not, because right now we can't, which I don't know if it's just BlueJeans versus like other.
Click the third button from the left at the top of the share screen. Wait, is that for, which question are you answering, Michelle? Are you answering?
Yeah, so if Mona wanted to screen to actually show the image, I don't think you actually have to control the shareability, Vicky. I think we just need to click the share screen button, which if everyone looks at the top
Can you
of the
do that
BlueJeans
now?
window.
Can you share the screen now if you wanted?
Not mine.
So right now it's disabled.
Okay, yeah. So I can enable it. So you, whichever you want to do, Mona, just let me know before 5 minutes before we go.
I'll do it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, honey. Very good. Just remind me to enable the screen share. I don't know about uploading files. I have no earthly idea about that.
Am I accidentally sharing my screen right now?
No.
Okay.
I see nothing. Except all of our beautiful.
Good. I'm glad.
I see. Oh God, that's scary, isn't it?
Okay. Well, shall we get started?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, we're just going to run through what we've covered. We're not going to recover anything.
Oh wait, but now I've got to remember how to do this with Keynote, screen share with Keynote on BlueJeans. All right, I should have tried this before. Let's see, screen share. Keynote. Oh, yes, I remember. I do not care for this. Let me try the play now and see what happens. Are you getting the whole thing? The whole screen? Not just the whole big screen?
Well, I have a split screen because I think that's just my setting.
No, I mean, you're getting the whole slide. You're not getting you're getting the presentation view.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Off we go. All right, guys. So this is how we started. And you see how we're ending. And it mostly fit into what we did. I can't believe we're on week 9 already. It really, really is crazy. So body language, and I can make these review slides available to you as well. You've got them all in the big slides, but it's just reduced. We just want to remind you of body language and the things we looked at and how important it is, especially on TV. Here's the science. Words are the least important thing, according to listeners of speeches. Keep your audience engaged as our #1 goal. We don't want our audience to look like that top right corner. And this is just so funny. I had to include it because it's so true. Are facial expressions powerful, everybody? Yes, they are. Just ask this little doggy. He's telling us everything we need to know. Mirror neurons. I'm seeing some mirror neurons right now, and I see some smiling faces coming back at me. That's good. I like that. That's your mirror neurons at work. Remember, whatever you're doing with your facial expressions and your eyes and your mouth, that's all more powerful than your words, because if they're in conflict, so happy to be here today, I could just almost burst. Your facial expressions are going to win. Natural resting face. Remember, that's where you're going to default to, so you don't steal focus from another person when they're speaking. Michelle, the counterintuitive open up if you are feeling nervous and not confident. Just open up. Show us your palms. It shows that you're not hiding anything. A gesture is from the heart and meaningful and intentional. So we want you to use your hands for good, but keep your gestures open, welcoming, and slow when you're on camera and close to your body. Every single gesture should be choreographed, as Amanda Gorman did here. Maybe not quite to that extent. Remember, if you're gesturing off the camera, we have no earthly idea what you're talking about. It adds no meaning, only distraction, especially those dancing thumbs. Scaling is very important, remember? What the size of the room, that is how we judge how we gesture, how we speak, our facial expressions. And weighty gestures. Remember that? We practiced the taffy pulling thing to make your gestures weighty and not just wing waves. Open up, open up, open up. I'm the winner. I'm the boss. I'm in charge. I'm the expert. And there's another one. Remember your posture. Remember, I want you to breathe. How much I want you to breathe. This opens up everything so you can breathe better, which will make you sound better. You'll also look better, and you'll last longer. I'll let you know how I am today at 6:30 when I am finally done with all of the Zooms today. I better behave myself, posture-wise. Let your diamond shine. All that means is just open yourself up to everybody. Let everybody know that you are not a predator or their prey. Questions?
How's everyone doing with eye contact?
Well, at the moment, yes, good. All right.
Very good.
So now let's talk about our voice a little bit. Try not to be the Charlie Brown teacher, if you all know who that is. The sound of the voice of the Charlie Brown teacher is very, very boring. It's playing. I forgot that these slides play on the ones embedded in Google Slides don't. Here's some more science for you. 23% said that voice quality was the most important thing when they were listening to a speech. 11% thought content was the most important. So it's very important to have those good breaths so you can let that sound, as you know, sound waves ride on the air that comes through your larynx. You want your audience to be interested, engaged, and convinced. You must be interested, engaged, interesting, engaging, and convincing. More science. Remember, this is the voice that's coming through the mask. This is the voice that's coming through the throat. And this is the voice that's coming through the core. What we need to do is balance them all together. There's your little vocal folds. Little glottis. The diaphragm. Remember the diaphragm? That's the boss of your breathing, is your diaphragm. Remember the breathing exercises we talked about. And if you've forgotten them, let me know and I'll help you remember. Being my favorite. Clarity comes from enunciation, not volume. Volume comes from the core, not the throat. And I am managing my volume with my diaphragm. And projection, that comes through the mask, so I can reach the back seat in the theater without a microphone. We have pitfalls, and most of you don't employ these pitfalls as a rule. So that is all a good thing. You remember the damn it rule? Hi, I'm Vicki Roush, and I work for Convey Communications, damn it. Use the pause. Use the pause. Use the pause. An important highlight about what you're talking about. You can transition from one idea to another, but remember to keep your physical tension when you pause. Don't deflate. Keep that tension up. That is really what's going to grab other people's attention. Questions? After that quick little wrap?
Yeah, can you remind me what the physical tension?
Yes, I can. Remember, it's like we talked about it like having the thought hanging out in the air after you've said it. Hi, my name is Vicky Roush, and I work at Convey. Okay, here it is without the physical tension. Hi, I'm Vicky Roush. I work at Convey. See, it's a little, I overdid it there, but that's it. Does that help? Does that bring it back? Yeah.
Yeah, your body is still invested in it, even as you're
Right.
ending, as opposed
Uh-huh.
to
The whole thought is still in your mind. You're still there. You're still present. You just stop talking for a second. Right? It's just, it really makes a huge difference. Any other questions? Yes, guys. All right. With that, did everybody sign in? Oh yeah, here we go. We have a few people. Oh,
we're gonna do the story one.
yes, I'm just looking at the sign there where he wrote, hug every single person. I don't know if I told you last week, but I got my first hug since March 7th of last year, recently. And it's made a new woman out of me, I'm telling you. I know. And our shot's going to sign up for his vaccinations. How are you guys? Is everybody vaccinated here? No. You're all too young. Well,
wait a second.
No one in eastern Montana wants to get vaccinated, so I drove out there to make use of their surplus.
Oh, good.
Oh, good. That's a long drive but I would do it.
Worth it.
Yeah. Oh, heck yeah. All right. Let me bring up the other slides and share those.
I was supposed to be eligible on Monday, this coming Monday, but because Vermont has one of the highest disparities between racial disparities for vaccination, they tried this rule where, like, if you have a person of color who qualifies, you can also get vaccinated if you bring them in, they're part of your household. And that wasn't fixing it. And so the governor was finally like, all right, listen, BIPOC people can go just get vaccinated now. Just do it, starting tomorrow. So I'm it's only like a few days before my slotted time, but like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Give me that vaccine.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Vicky, we see
right
another,
away.
we just see this thin blue line, which I don't know why it does that. More lip side of it.
Is that what I picked the wrong one? I know why it does that, because it doesn't tell me what I'm doing.
Why do you have a thin blue line?
Don't be funny. Because it doesn't, Blue Jeans doesn't show me which screen. I have to guess.
Oh, no.
So now I have to remember which one I did before so I can pick. What do you see now?
There we go.
All right. You know, if I have two choices to make, what's going to happen?
It's like me in directions.
I'm going to make the wrong one.
All right. So storytelling, which we went over quite a bit. So I am going to just breeze through this pretty quickly. So if you have any questions, let me know. So the three components we talked about during storytelling was the context of storytelling, both historical, sociological, and even biological. We talked about the key components of storytelling, which we're going to rehash over here in a second. And we talked about the importance of coloring your words when you're telling a story. No point in doing a boring story. It's a waste. And the thing that I will highlight here is that stories don't just shape our society. You know that that's done, but it literally changes our body and our brains. So and this is important for y'all because you work in science, right? So you work surrounded by facts and figures and data, but our brains need more than that. When we stimulate our brains with just the data, with just the facts, boop, 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 a couple parts light up, right? If you did an fMRI. However, when we are engaging, if we want to engage the brain, we are using descriptive language, evocative language. we're engaging the senses, and we're making sure that we're also emotionally evocative as well. So we're using everything at our disposal to make sure our brain is firing on all cylinders, to use a metaphor. And if we do, we will get rewarded, or at least you will reward our audiences. If it's a great story, if it makes them feel good, that's dopamine. If it's a story where we are truly getting them to relate to our protagonist, where they actually see themselves in the shoes, where they know that we share a common aspiration, you're releasing oxytocin. And when you do that, you make them more willing to trust you, more willing to believe you, more willing to relate to you. And that's what oxytocin does for us. So there's 5 key components in your story. And we're not going to go through all of them. But again, a hero, your main character, it is a person with aspirations. Your setting, this is your opportunity to really engage the senses. Use vivid language when we're describing things. You could almost use a checklist in your story. What are people seeing? How do they see it? What does it look like? What are people hearing? What does it sound like? Can we engage, smell, taste? Can we make it like kinesthetic? What are we feeling? What are we touching? A good story has a challenge, right? So what is the challenge they have to go through? These challenges sow doubts. These challenges give us sort of the tension. And as change makers, it's the challenge between the world that it is versus the world as it ought to be. So make sure there's a challenge. That challenge forces the character to make a choice. Stories that change the world allow people to see that the character themselves has a choice to make. Sometimes they're hard decisions or difficult decisions. They may be decisions that, out of context, might be difficult to explain, but you've told the story. So people know why they go through this difficult choice. Usually it's connected to the hero's aspirations. So we've laid the groundwork for that. Why is it that this person made the difficult choice? Well, they know that in order to succeed, they have to do X, Y, and Z. They know that the most important thing they can do is put food on the table and protect their children, so they'll swallow their dignity. But why should they even have to? This is why. So there's a choice. Powerful. It gets them through the day, or it shapes them as a person. And that's the outcome. Being able to point out that this is the choice they made is a way that you point out the moral of the story. Not just that the story is ended now, but what do we learn from it? What was the reason behind all of this? And can we as a society do better? This is where you might be able to do your call to action for folks. So that's your 5 components. And remember, you want to color your words. This is where we get out the cookies and cream. We're able to say, well, what? Yeah.
I thought I had a picture of cookies and cream in there.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's okay. But remember, we did this cookies and cream exercise with how the weather is, or how you describe your dog. Cookies and cream. Oh, cookies and cream. I don't have to say the weather or the description of the dog, even when I'm able to paint, when able to color using my words. You get what I mean? Just with the intonation, the inflection, the emotional weight behind each word.
Acting. Some of us call it acting.
Acting. And so when you're preparing your story, your speech, whatever, we call that choreographing. It's not just speech writing, it's choreographing. Where are the pauses? That's how you can sound interesting. That's how you can sound engaging. That's how you can sound convincing. And that's how we get our audience, indeed, to be interested, engaged, and convinced.
Hello.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's the quickest wrap-up we've ever done.
I know. And now I'm fantasizing about how we can make it even quicker, which will stress me later. Questions on story or on anything else that we've done? We barely covered our impromptu exercise. We barely covered like in-person stuff. We barely covered how we sort of own a room when we're in person, or how we do some of that stuff. So any questions, the whole gamut, the whole thing. All right. Well, then let's move on to, and you can continue to ask questions throughout the rest of the hour. We have an hour together still left. So now let's move on to your actual presentations for tomorrow. What can we do to workshop? What are the areas where you're not? So go ahead.
You
Next
scared
week.
poor Mona.
Next week. What can
Body
we do?
language. Your body language spoke volumes, Mona.
I missed it. I was looking at the camera. But so let's go over, and I'd love to spend a little bit of time with each of you doing this. Also, so you know, this is a great time to submit a practice video before the big video. If you want some feedback on any changes that you're making, you've got a week to do it. So the earlier you can do the feedback, email us and say, hey, listen, I uploaded a video. Can you give me some feedback? We'll email you back with some feedback so that you can
alert us that you
yeah, please alert us, because we've got, you can imagine we have a lot of Google files and folders and the whole thing. But if you let us know that you took the time to practice, we'll certainly take the time to give you the feedback and whatnot. So let's go over let's spend a few minutes on each of you. Instead of just popcorning it, why don't I just go down on my grid here? I see Jennifer Sherry is up right at the top corner. So let's talk with you, Jennifer. Tell me how you're feeling about your speech. Tell me how, if there's areas you want to work on or modify, what can we workshop for you? And everyone else, of course, pay attention, because these principles may apply to you.
Well, I think the thing I'm struggling with the most in how to like create the final best version of my story is how to sort of package it. Like I feel like at this point I have this core piece of the story that is going to stay in and is going to stay pretty much how it was, which is like my experiences learning to forage from someone who like living off of the land was just her way of life, and that was okay. Like there was a choice and there was a lesson. And I think the beginning and the end is what I'm just struggling to put around it. I want to take your advice and find a way to like start it in a way that connects to the end, with the story being the sort of middle section. But I feel like I have all these pieces now. Like I have all these pieces from the original story. I have the pieces that I added into this latest version of the story, and I just can't quite figure out like how to make the beginning and the end fit right. I think right now, so if you'll recall, the beginning of my story, I wanted to create like intrigue around mushrooms, and I wanted to describe something that I think I'm having a hard time describing, which is that like there's a lot of things in nature that just go unnoticed, and a lot of mushroom foragers experience this thing where once you start looking for them, you get this like crazy muscle memory in your brain, and you start like just seeing them all over the place, and you become so much better at seeing them than anyone else who's never done that before. And then like the end of the story, and then I have the story about Serengeti, and then the end of the story is like trying to convey the importance of finding those connections in nature and noticing the things around us that make this whole world tick. But then I have all these other pieces about fungi from the first story, and I just don't know yet how I'm gonna like pull pieces out, put pieces in. I'm a little lost with my beginning and end.
I love that. Okay, so here's some things that I'm pulling out of this question. Openings, endings, which I think we didn't even like do enough justice to. We could go over more. And pieces. So first, let me go from the pieces part. I love that. What that shows me is that you've evolved the story and you've grown new parts out, and enough so that like, oh, can I use this for this, or can I use that for this? So that's a process of growth and creation, and I freaking love that when it comes to storytelling and even when it comes to presenting. And so I want you to think of this not as pieces, but as tools. What tool is fit for the purpose? So if you, in one crowd, you're like, this is a crowd where I really need them, where I think like opening their eyes is the big thing here. So what pieces here get people to just open their eyes? Or this is a crowd where I'm going to have some difficulty getting them to pay attention, or however it is, like you're answering the question, what is it that the audience needs? And so then what tools will I pluck out and sort of utilize for this audience? So that's one way to look at it. And that's how we can approach the openings and the endings too. So in an opening, it's important to have a solid hook, something that just grabs their attention right from the start. It makes them look up from their phones or whatever else they were doing, right? Similarly, for an ending, you want something that is powerful, that leaves them with something to talk about afterwards, that makes them go, oh, whoa, or propels them into action, which is useful for us often as we're trying to get people to do a thing, right? So, and so think about the pieces and tools that do that. So some tools that allow you to do these things. So one tool that's a really great opener are surprises, shocks, unusual facts. If you can bring one up on a person without presenting any other context, you can kind of grab their attention. You've got one of those for yourself, Jennifer, right? Or it could be, so that's everything that we've been told about mushrooms is a lie. Like what? I still can't get over it. Every time I go to the grocery store, I'm like, lies!
I do too. Baby Bella, okay.
Okay, Baby Bella. Screw you. My co-op actually has a lot of different kinds of mushrooms. I'm very happy for it. But still. So that could be something. But if you're trying to get people to open up their eyes, then you could, so that's one way. You could shock them into attention, right? Another way that is important for our openers, and I think this will be useful for a lot of you because you're often presenting things. You want to write for, and we talked about this a little bit with when we were talking about Bemnet's presentation last week. We want to make sure, I don't know if you heard my stomach there. We want to make sure that we are addressing the needs of the audience. So we're kind of like, if we know what the audience is, we're kind of taking their temperature before we even walk in the room. What is their interest? What is it that they are here for? And address that directly. That might actually answer your question. And I know that we're doing like a mock speech, mock presentation. So you kind of have to imagine what the audience is. But it's a very useful question to ask ourselves. What is it that the audience will get out of this? And if we put ourselves in the seat of the audience, we can ask ourselves, why are they here? What are they getting out of this? What is it that they're here to see? And how will my presentation serve that interest? So that's another way that you can think about your opening, and it lends itself very well to a closing that kind of wraps itself all up. So if the audience is lay people, it could be like, you know what? They probably don't even know what they don't know about fungi. So what I'm going to do is they're going to come out of this with all kinds of facts and knowledge and a perspective that the world around them is so much greater than it ever was. You could open it with, I found out that I have a superpower that I just had to open my eyes to use. Let me tell you, and you might actually come up with the same superpower or something along those lines, right? That creates what's called a curiosity gap. And it used to be super popular on the internet, right? Like, actually it still is. And now it's just turned into clickbait. Like, one little trick will have you blah, 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 blah. Like one key trick or what they don't want you to know. Basically, whenever you're saying something that makes everyone go, wait, what is it? Wait, what is it? Do I just click and I'll find out? So that's what clickbait is kind of about and where it all came from. You can do the same thing. It's an ancient real trick, like to be like, one key trick will help you do this. You might be less of a, now that's like almost a meme on the internet by itself. So but anything that will make the audience be like, wait, what? What do I need to know? So that might work for you. So which of these pieces, and let's call them tools, which of these tools will give you the opening that you want? Do you want to use a curiosity gap? Do you want to shock people? Do you want to directly and immediately serve the interest of the audience? Which I would say just generally do that anyway. So if the audience is there to learn about the impact of a change in policy or something, right? Then you might be able to say like one change out of everything else that we've studied creates a 14% difference in how we do things, as opposed to everything else is 1-2%. But let me show you what that 14% actually means to the person on the ground living it. So you're first saying, I've got a secret for you that I'm going to reveal. All you have to do is stick around. But first, I'm going to do this. And then you introduce them to a story. You're going from small to large with that story. So that might be a way that you can use a curiosity gap and also introduce a sort of small to large story. And remember, when I say small to large, I mean you've got a big key concept that's full of data. But the way that you're grabbing people's attention is by starting small and growing big, growing into that data. But first by starting with an anecdata.
Let me give another way that, not another way, but a way that this is how I put a show together. And it kind of helps build a beginning, middle, and end. And as we should, start with the ending. One, because we want to be aware of how we're going to have the audience feel at the end. So kind of start with the ending. So I pick not only my last number, but I also pick my second to the last number, because that's going to be the really big number. Then the last number will be a big number too, but not as big. So I get big applause, big applause, big applause, big applause, standing ovation. Then I do my encore, but that's always the same song, so that's easy. Then I go back to the beginning, and I pick the first couple of songs. Then I pick the songs that I'm going to open the second half with. Then I kind of fill in with the songs, the leftover songs, because I've got a big list of songs I want to do. Then I really have to do very little rearranging when I do that. There's a flow. I think of how it's going to flow with the tempo and like the lighthearted man-bashing songs that I know you'll find incredibly amazing, that I am famous for, and a few self-deprecating songs, and some serious torch songs, all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of things to think about with the flow. But the big thing is I get the ending down first. I know where I am going. Okay, I don't have point A, but I have got point B set. So that's how I think about putting a show together. And
I love that. I think that's really great. That's a really great point, because again, that forces us to ask ourselves, how should the audience feel by the end of this, as the first question?
I want them to be at least as tired as me. Ready for my oxygen treatment.
Okay, so openings, endings, and all the tools that we can use. So I haven't written your speech for you, of course, or choreographed, but I hope that gives you something to start putting it together. As you start thinking about it, you might be like, this is a big opener here, and this is a big closer here. I can fit everything else in between. Okay. Next on my little grid screen, which changes inexplicably, I don't know why, is Michelle. Tell us, what can we do to workshop your speech?
Yeah. I feel like the grid probably changes because people are moving, and I have been shuffling around trying to find my notes from last time. That's probably why I'm up. Yeah, I feel like my speech hasn't changed too much throughout, but I kind of want my opening. Well, I think someone had said in the feedback for the last time that I did it, that to look for, maybe it was you, Arshad, to look for ways to create that kind of like circularity in the story and connect the beginning to the end. And I feel like my current opening is very much just like, hi hi, I'm me, and I'm at NRDC, and this is what I work on. Um, Partially because I think I took the direction that your intro is part of your speech, or like your intro of who you are is part of your speech. So I felt like I have to start with that, but I think I should let go of that if you would agree. And I think one of the potential ways that would be more interesting to start is the question that I kind of pose eventually of like, the think of the most creative you've ever been or the most successful collaboration you've ever had. What was that environment like? As a way to kind of like set the stage and open with a question. But I'm not sure how to tie that, how to repackage my story if I start there. But I do think that that's a much more compelling opening. And that's what I'm currently thinking about is how to create something. I think it flows nicely in like a linear way from beginning to end, but it doesn't kind of loop around, if that makes sense.
Okay. So here's a couple responses to that. First, your intro, this is what happens with a lot of us, is that when we think of an introduction, we almost treat it like a tiny mini resume. This is my name, here's my position, my title, and how long I've worked here, right? It doesn't have to be that. It could be, my name is Arshad, and I'm really passionate about the way people are seen and heard in the world. And that's why I am working with people to do exactly that. I've chosen to spend my time just working with women and people of color in lifting up their own powerful voices. That's just another way of saying I'm a principal at Convey Communication, a firm that does public speech coaching, whatever, right? Like that is a little bit more emotional in a way, and it gets not emotional, but it's a little bit more sort of motivational, aspirational. It gets to why we do what we do. You could say, I, like many of you, work in an office, but right now, like many of you, I am working from home. And from home, I'm trying to do my work as, at this organization, NRDC. But one thing that has clearly come through to me, or whatever, I don't know how you want to do that. Like, this could be your introduction to talk about vulnerability. This could be your introduction to talk about the environment, what it does to us. So that's one piece. So your introduction can flow into your speech without having to be like kind of a resume and then a jarring bloop into a thing, right? Like, and one thing that we can do, those of us on this call, we are doing this work not just because it's a way that we get a paycheck and then we come home and do whatever else that we do. We're doing this work because it is our interest, our passion, and we want something to come of it beyond just like balancing a checkbook, right? There's something greater to it. So you can connect with that greater motivation. Like if all we wanted was a paycheck, we probably could have done a great many other things. But what we wanted was to do something that makes an impact on the world. And so you could talk about it from that way. And Michelle, you could literally just talk about like, hi, my name is Michelle. And I think for a lot of us for the last year, I, like you, have been exploring what vulnerability is, maybe almost against my will, here in a pandemic, trapped by myself. And, one of my passions, music, has really helped me reframe what that is. Let me tell you what I mean. Right? Yeah. So that could be it.
Joel used to use a phrase for his candidates and say, "You wouldn't know it by looking at me," but that was a line he used an awful lot. That just popped right back into my head. I don't know how, whatever, something you said popped it into my head.
Yeah, I think because of how I've crafted the story to kind of like talk about vulnerability and how it can help us solve these challenges that I work on of climate change and the pandemic that we're all experiencing. I think I feel like it might be interesting to draw a connection perhaps between like, I'm a scientist, I'm a science fellow. What does that have to do with, vulnerability and emotion? And like, that's so much of my speech, but that it actually makes you better.
I like that.
Maybe.
I like that.
As a scientist, you wouldn't think.
It could be along the lines of Vicky's suggestion. Like, you may know me as Michelle, the person who does this kind of stuff, but I am here to tell you, blah 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 blah, right? Like, you still get to say your name and what you do, but it's not jarring. It flows, right? I love that. Yeah. I love that. What you may not know about me, because it gets to curiosity and it's still personal, biographical. Who I miss, Vicky, I was talking over. Who was the
Joel.
person?
Joel.
Oh, Joel.
Our beloved Joel.
Yes.
I don't quote just anybody.
Cool. Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to say about your comment is, people love, like, there's like almost a sense of satisfaction that comes with tying up something at the end. And that could be as simple as referring back to the beginning. If you're putting in a traditional format, if you're putting like your thesis, like the point of your whole speech, right up top at the beginning, which is not a bad idea, reiterating it again, maybe using different words, but very clearly reiterating it at the end can give you that quick fix of satisfaction for having those bookends. I do love clever circular references. So as you get more used to that, you'll be able to employ that a little bit more. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It does wake up people right at the ending too. Oh, I get it now. That kind of thing.
Like,
when you use a good circular reference.
Yeah. Next on my grid is Tenny. What can we do to workshop yours? What is stopping you from taking it to the next level, do you think?
So I think, like everyone else, the closing and the opening and just trying to make that a lot stronger, but everything you've already said has been pretty helpful. I think one of the other things I don't know if we got to was sort of about like background and like the best way to sort of, I think maybe more body language, positioning yourself, especially because I am kind of moving a lot. And the last couple times I've been sitting versus like standing, I've been like moving myself as I practice around different spots to figure out what looks better. But I think just in that presentation and having that confidence as I'm giving the speech is probably something I'm working on, probably the only thing right now.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad you asked that one. So first, let's talk a little bit about your lighting as it interacts with your complexion. So as we mentioned, the people who invented digital cameras only really ever developed them for very fair-skinned folks. Tenny, you're the darkest complected person of all of us here, so you more than anyone has to deal with the fact that the development of technology has happened in racist ways. So So first, if we're talking about background, I want you always to test yourself out before you get on camera to see if everyone else can actually see your facial expressions, especially when it's on a grid. Like I'm currently formatting everyone on a grid, so your face is even smaller. It is harder to see because what is the camera looking at? There's 3 very bright points of light right behind you. So that's the 2 overhead lights and then 1 reflection of one of the overhead lights. And that's what the camera's kind of seeing. So you can solve that by having some very warm, diffuse, but still pretty, like good amount of light coming at your face in front of you. And I don't know if you have that with you right now. And that's going to be true with whatever your setting is. Now, I loved one of your videos you did. You actually did standing. And I don't know if that's what you want to do for your final video. If that's the case, I will encourage you, one, is that your movements really have to be intentional. When you're standing, for me, because I move a lot, that just means, holy crap, there's so much more movement I will bring into it.
So much freedom.
So that's why I have to sit. I am actually more comfortable standing. But so I'm on video so much, and I know what that's going to do. It's going to distract people. So for you, movement is a key piece. Body language is a key piece of your presentation. So what I want you to do is make sure that we can see more of your body by moving. You can see what I'm doing, moving the camera. Oh, don't break anything. Further and further away. That's not great if you're sitting and it's on a grid, but this will allow your movements you will be able to see more of you, and you can make a larger movement if you need to without being all wild. Because, again, the opposite of this, moving in really closely like this. So a small movement of my eyes going like that is going to be pretty significant, right? So because when you're closer in, small movements are really big. And so this just becomes wild when all I've really done is just whatever. So, so think about the camera distance, think about the lighting for that kind of stuff. Because your speech is so movement oriented, getting a little bit more distance will allow you a fuller range of motion without looking too crazy. Go ahead.
You made a big pause for me to interrupt there. That's another reason that you got to watch pauses. The background that you had, I think there was mailboxes or something. I had asked you about it. It seems to me the lighting was good in there, and it was a cool background.
Yeah. As
if my memory serves me, which does on occasion.
Okay, great.
I don't know if you were actually centered in that video. It feels like you weren't, or there was a weird angle. But again, because there's a lot of generally you want to be centered in your video, in your angles. So keep a note of that. I think it was at an angle. So I think about the lines that I see in a video. So in yours, Tenny, the lines in the office behind you, I love them. In a way, they're very subtly all pointing to you, because they're just like, because the perspective is narrowing in like that, which I love. That's a little bit of what I have going on here in my background too. It makes it actually look really spacious when I actually live in a small house, but it looks huge. So if you're gonna do that, if like the physical presentation is really big, what it is for you, those lines, the thinking about what the background is kind of implying is going to, that's like advanced level stuff that you can think about if you like to, is really gonna make an effect there. I also said, for example, in Mona's, I see lines. It's just like what the ceiling is doing. I like that. So, okay. The other thing that I wanted to just sort of give you an unrelated piece of feedback, was be sure to give us a little bit of emotional content when you're talking about it. You set us up for that in some of your speeches, kind of in a little bit in the beginning. I want you to end with that too. And so we've talked a couple of these, like, how do we have a powerful ending? Give me emotional content in the end about that kind of stuff. And you are really developing yourself toward it. So that can come in sort of what you've learned, or it can come in why you've kind of developed this. So give us a little bit of emotional content. Maybe end it with something for us to chew on, something just to think on. Next in my grid is Arohi. I keep saying that instead of Arohi, and everyone says Arohi, and I feel like I was told to say Arohi.
You're right.
Okay, great. Okay, Arohi, you're next.
Yeah, so from the last Stand and Deliver, I've been really working on the challenge and choice component. I think, Arshad, you had mentioned that the sort of climax of my story was that I gave up, which is not really a challenge or a choice. It's like the opposite of both of those things. And so thinking about how I can restructure my story so that I am presenting the rest for the compost process as a deliberate choice, or maybe not as deliberate, but as a choice that inevitably I had to choose. So that's one thing. And I think I can change that with a couple of sentences. But what I also really want to pull out, like, this story is no longer about composting, right? There's like a bigger message in there, go figure, about about rest as just something that we all need to do a little bit more of, especially in our current work environments. And so I'm thinking now of ways to weave the contrast between dirt and soil and being overworked and having that rest. But I don't know if that's too many contrasts to try and weave into this story. But I really want to set that parallel of the moral of rest with how that rest manifests not only within us, but also within the dirt versus soil story.
Yes. So first, the revelation that this is no longer just about soil, is it? I love. And that is, I think, a little bit of an underlying theme that we've seen in the evolution of many of our stories. It's not about the thing that happened, but we've learned from it, right? So first with contrasts, I love contrasts. I think they're really good tools for us to use. So you don't have to shy away from them. The question of too many contrasts, I don't know. The choice piece. Let me tackle this with you. I gave up. You're saying that maybe that's not the best choice to highlight, but I almost answered this question as you kept talking, because did you give up or did you choose to rest? You framed it as giving up, and maybe that's another little lesson for you to learn, that your in this case, maybe not your body, but your frustration just forced you to take some distance, and it was almost like it was involuntary rest. Right? That you had fiddled and toyed and fiddled and toyed and you poked and you did this and you did this. And honestly, what the soil needed was rest. And the way that you found that out is that your brain, your level, your emotional sort of investment in this also needed rest. When you rested, the soil rested. When the soil rested, it became compost. When you came back to it, you were thrilled about it. Right? Like, so in this case, so when we tell, the way that I tell storytelling is a little bit different than a lot of people will frame like a hero's narrative that you might learn in a literature class, because it often incorporates other components that I find to be like a little like saviors and mentors and this kind of stuff, because it's really easy for us as in nonprofits to just latch on to savior, like, oh, I'm the mentor, I'm the person who intervened, which I think is not necessarily empowering. But in this case, there is kind of like some outside force that's come in and acted upon you, or unintentional actions you've taken. Like, so I guess I'm kind of thinking out loud when I say this, but if I'm highlighting the choices you made, so some of them were accidental, right? Like you accidentally rested, or you accidentally did do things right, but you didn't know that they were right, right? Like when you added some stuff in, it just didn't have an immediate result. You just need to like let it go for a minute and rest. So those are places that I think it's not that there isn't a choice. It's just that you're framing it not as a choice. So getting frustrated and giving up, that is a choice. You chose to rest, but you framed it as like throwing up your hands. So maybe that's a lesson for you there, and that's part of the outcome. I don't know. That doesn't seem like totally satisfactory to me when I say that to you as an answer, but I do want you to think about reframing things, that this giving up is actually choosing to rest. My choice to rest had this impact.
Yeah, I'll play around with it. I really wanted this speech to also be very sensory, and so I'm going to keep all of those like descriptive terms, but how do you all feel about when I'm talking about like overworking my compost bin, being too attentive to it, playing around with the speed of delivery? So like having a little bit of a faster pace, talking about this, all that I'm doing, all that I'm doing, all that I'm doing, all that I'm not doing, blah, 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 and then moving into something that's a little bit slower once I have that quote unquote revelation about rest.
Yes.
I say yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I think the revelation is the climax, right? Like you're leading up to it. The speed is also kind of keying to the audience and almost foreshadowing your frustration.
Yep.
Yeah, like I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this. Ah, ah, ah. Right? Like that. I'm being dramatic, but like
You're
that's
acting.
okay. We're acting, right? So I think that's okay. And that is maybe even a good example of where like slouching is good for this as body language because it's serving a role. Like, oh, like you're telling people, I'm exhausted. I'm frustrated. I just don't know. What am I supposed to even do?
Ah.
Right? So
And then you rise to the occasion, literally.
yeah, right? Like, and after you've rested, you're just like slowly kind of coming up, like being like, I went back and I went checked. And I looked at it and I could smell it and I could take my hands in it and it's soil. I don't know. I mean, you kind of explain the denouement. I don't know what I'm actually talking about, but
You nailed it.
usually how incompetent I am in my backyard. One of my friends is like kind of coming and helping and trying to take over because we're like, this is going to be the summer where we get to hang out. And so he's helping me with my backyard. I'm like, I don't know. Is this, did you want a shovel? Like a spade or something. Like, isn't that just a tiny shovel? I don't know what I'm doing.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
yes, that's the right instinct. Okay. Next in my little grid is Gia. What can we do to elevate? What questions do you have? What hesitations? Where can we add some spice?
Okay, and my first challenge is to cut my speech down to 4 minutes because last time it's over 5 minutes, and I'm struggling on what to cut out. I guess I will cut most of the story setting part, like how I know this job and how I apply to this job. Maybe I will cut this part. And I'm not sure about should I cut a little bit about how I prepare for this job. Like I did some memorize the script, did one-on-one practice with each other. This is kind of long and not very fruitful information, but I'm not sure if I cut those how I how to connect with the challenge part. So I want to learn some advice from you about what to cut. And the second question is, I would like to take your advice about record the beginning of like the air quality in Beijing makes me interested in the environmental issues, and I do want to add a little bit more details at beginning to talk about that experience. So I want to record that information at the end of my speech, but I'm currently not sure where should I put it. The first one option is I just put it at the very end, and like now I have come back to Beijing again, working on environmental issues, and the air quality is much better, and blah blah. And another choice is I can put it before the lessons part. Just when I finish the story and I talk about the current situation in Beijing, and then talk about when I look back to that experience I learned. Blah blah. I'm not sure where to put it. Yeah, that's the second question. And the third thought is like last time I mentioned a question like how many times have you been rejected, and have you been rejected dozens of times? And last time I put it on the challenge part of my story, and I'm thinking if whether I should put it a little bit forward, like at the beginning of the story to to start my story. I'm not sure whether it's a good strategy or not.
Well, I have some thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So your first question is about how to cut down. And some strategies that you can use. So we've got a few strategies for that. First, you're right. Some of the things that you have added into your speech might not really add a lot of information. So anytime you're like, well, what should I cut? What should I cut? Look at the things that, have good emotional weight, or set us up for good emotional weight, and we can keep those. Think about those things that you can really, because for me, usually, not only do I need to cut, but I often also need to slow down. So for me, I always have to be like, all right, cut more than you think you need to cut. So what are the things that I cut? I often do way too much setup and context. So think about all the setup stuff that either is emotional or very sensory. You can keep those. If it's just descriptive and it doesn't actually come back later in the story, or have a lot of emotional weight, I bet you could cut it. Another piece of advice for cutting is generally cut big, not small. Cut sections, not words. So if you're like, oh, if I just cut a few words here and a few words here, if you're a minute and a half over on a 4-minute speech, a few words is never going to get you to the goal. You have to cut out entire sections. So what I often say is like, listen, if you've got a speech and you're trying to make 4 points in the speech, cut out an entire point. Now you have 3 points. The least important point is gone. Somebody can ask you a question in Q&A about it later. Fine, whatever. But now you've just gotten so much time back. So cut sections, cut big, not small. Here's what I'm thinking about the story structure for you. So you start with air quality. Once you started with air quality, I think that gives the listener a little bit more context, but then how to connect with the bulk of your story, with the lesson. So one of the reasons why air pollution is such, for me, I think like an important but also difficult problem is that the air we breathe is just so fundamental to our existence. We can't not have air. And so when we put junk, when we put poison in the air, what are we supposed to do? The alternative can't be to not breathe. It just deprives us of choices. And the second thing is it's just so big. How do we, when there is a smog day where the air quality index is terrible, it just seems so daunting as a problem. So much bigger than we are, and yet so important that we can't not participate in the act of breathing. So I think when you're talking about, and Beijing, of course, is one of the cities that has had, legendary, globally terrible air quality problems in the past and now again. So I think the key here is, you're talking about rejection on a small level, is to bring in the almost overwhelming superhuman problem of air pollution in Beijing, the air surrounding us, poisoning us, right? Like how big a problem that is, and that propelled you into doing something in the environment. And then most of your stories, so that's daunting. So the theme here is that this is daunting. How can anyone ever do anything about something so daunting? I figured I would try to do something in environment. And then you are confronted with the very personal, very small, but very personal to you problem of repeated and constant rejection. And how do we get over that? That rejection, learning that rejection has given you the resiliency to take on anything. And taking on something as big as air pollution in Beijing necessarily means that there are challenges that seem bigger than human. Challenges where that you are constantly running up against barriers that seem bigger than you, that seem like you can't overcome them. But your experience has told you over and over and over again that you will be rejected. But if you just keep persevering and doing the right thing, you can take a huge problem like that and just chip away at it, one piece after another piece after another piece. Rejection after rejection after rejection, nothing will stop you, and you will clear the air. Something along those lines. So your beginning has to be set up so that it's daunting and overwhelming. Your theme through the middle is that there is rejection, but so long as I keep doing the thing that I need to do over and over, I will build myself up to be unconquerable, to be dauntless. And then when I come back to Beijing, I can take anything on. It doesn't matter that this problem is so huge. I'm just going to keep going at it, just like I learned in, was it Pittsburgh? Just like I learned in Pittsburgh. So I would do that. So then third, that goes into your third question about rejections. So rejection is the theme, is the key to the lessons that you're learning. So if you're talking about like some of the training that you did, I would maybe like that could be part of your lead up. And so I trained every day. I practiced every day. I did, and I even practiced before I went up to the door. I did this and I did this and I did this. And it was hard and I got rejected. But I stuck to my practice. I stuck to the things I knew I needed to do. And as I did, it became easier. As I did, the rejections became not as important because I knew the important thing was if I do what I need to do, I'll get to the next door and the next door and the next door, and I will get people to continue to contribute and support our cause. And each one of those small victories adds up to the big victory. No matter how small those little tiny rejections, no matter how many of those little tiny rejections I got, I know at the end of the day, it's not how many rejections, it's how many victories. And all I need to do is to choose to keep going and accumulate those victories. Well, now I'm back to Beijing, and I see a daunting problem surrounding me in the air that I breathe. And it can seem like, what can one little action, one little thing do? But I know that if I do all the right steps, I do all the right things, if I use all the best practices, one by one by one, I'm going to chip away at this, and I will clear the air.
Okay, thanks. That really makes the same another level.
That's what we want. Next level, next level. Okay. Next, I've got Shuling on my grid.
Well, thank you. Even the last time I didn't get a chance to really talk about the presentation I would make, but in reflection, I'm thinking that the way that I made my diagnostic speech is not what I was planning to practice at the beginning of this training, which means I feel my story or my speech is quite self-centered. And while I'm trying to connect the dots to tell a complete story of my journey, but I feel it's so small, it doesn't serve the big purpose. And while I was making that speech, I wasn't thinking about my target audience or what purpose I want, and it's not really connecting to the science. So I'm having a hard time to think about what is actually the big, what's the big thing? What's the theme actually here that I can connect to, and how I can really further explore? Because while I'm trying to think about it, I think that would be a totally different story, if that makes sense.
First of all, I really appreciate this line of inquiry. How do I connect with my audience? How do I connect to the big theme? For those of us, we're all change makers. We're trying to change the world. That is a question we're constantly having to ask ourselves. Now, if it were just you and you are giving a talk, like a TED Talk about how great podcasts are, you don't have to connect it to a big theme. I mean, you probably do. It's a TED Talk. That's a big deal. But it's not always necessary to do that. Sometimes it's okay to have a really keen insight onto who you are. Now, we're Convey and we talk about big things. So I'm saying that's okay. But the point of the way that we're speaking is, yes, you should think about how you connect to your audience and how you connect to the big thing. So I guess I would say, what is a lesson in there that you learned that is applicable to your audience? That's one way that you can go to it. Or another way is start from the other direction. What is it that you think that your audience needs? that they can learn from this story? You're asking the same question either way, but the point of origin might give you a little bit, a different answer because the perspective changes a little bit. What does this audience need? And what can I teach them from my journey that would help them? If you do figure that out, make sure that you make it explicit. You can tease it in the beginning, like we all need a little bit of this. Or have you ever found yourself in a position where, or did you even know? So that could be like, you can kind of tease them at the beginning, and at the end, you kind of answer that question and you say, so at the end of the day, I found X and Y and Z. And when I look around, I can see that all of us need an X and Y and Z. My path to that was through podcasts. What is yours? And what will you do to explore your blah, 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 whatever it is, whatever your lesson is? So it could be something like that, a way to ask yourself what the audience needs. Doesn't answer your question, I think. I just love the way that you sound so much that I'm like, oh, right, yeah, I guess it didn't connect to the big thing.
I might actually change the story quite a bit because I really want to connect back to the work that I've been doing. So, just an alert in advance.
Okay. Well, be sure to record it and submit it to us so we can get you some feedback if we can make the really big changes.
Okay.
Next, I have Bemnet.
Yeah, thanks. So I think most of my questions are answered, but one question I have is how to, as you said, like tease at the beginning about the story, like coming up story. So as part of my fracking and radiation speech, I'm gonna talk about the story of my field trip experience, how I experienced application of fracking wastewater as a suppressant and how that is impacting rural community, especially the Amish community who are using that road for their daily work or for their agriculture. So the challenge I have is how I can introduce that story at the beginning of my talk, or how to engage the audience that this story is coming up, and for them to wait for the story coming up instead of introducing it after my talk about how fracking has radiation and then the different application and then coming up to the story. So
yeah,
the challenge. Thanks.
Vicky, did you have something?
That's it.
No, this is a great question.
Yeah.
I'm just leaning into this. This is how an audience might react when they really want to pay attention to something.
I know. It's like, yeah. So yes, I would start with the story, and I would say it like that. I would say, and just be really explicit, I'm about to tell you a story. So you could say, like, in our field, when you're presenting this group, in our field, we talk a lot about the science and the data. That's really important. I'm going to present to you quite a bit of it. But I want to introduce you first to X person, farmer, or kid playing, or a mother concerned about their kid, blah, blah, blah. I want you to introduce you to this person because our data affects the way that they go about their lives, whether they know it or they don't know it. And it affects the way, once they learn about what is around, like once they learn about this, it can affect their choices and what they do. So let me tell you about Farmer Bob and the impact of radiation in below his field, or the impact of him learning this, or how he can't sell his farm, or how Mama Jane now doesn't let the kid play in the gravel. I don't know. Rural Pennsylvania. So you might say, like, you might just be really explicit in how you introduce it, but you put it in context, right? Like, we do X and Y and Z. Have you thought about the people who it impacts? Well, on this field trip, I actually met a couple of these people. And so when I present to you this data, and I present to you the science behind how we derive this data, I'm going to first begin with how this is going to impact the communities, so that you know that when you present this data, or when you take this data out wherever, that there's more than just the stakeholders here in this room, and that what you choose to do with it affects the man I'm about to introduce you to. And then you say, here's Farmer Bob. Here's like a minute, like a vignette on like Farmer Bob and what they have to deal with, or whoever you choose for it to be. And then you go back and say, you're aware of what fracking is. It's when this happens and X and Y and Z. When we do X and Y and Z, this is the impact on the field. And then you go back to Farmer Bob at the very end to close it out. And you can say, so when you go back and you present this data or you do whatever X, make sure that Farmer Bob is in your room, just in your mind, and put it in context for this man or for this mom or for this whatever. If you, at the very beginning, introduce somebody almost as a figure that isn't actually in the room, but you're putting them in the room, and say, let this person be with you the entire way, you're putting a human face on the data or the science on it, and it will be easier for everyone to remember because they've connected the numbers with something else. I think this would work probably even in a group of scientists, but definitely in a group of journalists, which I know is your other audience you have to think about. Mm-hmm. All right, don't have a lot of time left, so I'm going to move right on to
one thing to that.
Oh yeah,
Arshad, please. I really like that, and it's very important to have it be a person that you're highlighting and talking about, real person, even better, than a mystery group of people, because people can relate to a person and they can dismiss a mystery group easier, especially if it's something that might not be good. So it's really important, I think, to put that human face on it, like you said, and name Farmer Bob. I'm sorry, I started laughing because I used to know a guy who grew pot on Big Bikey, and his nickname was Farmer Bob. So I apologize for laughing. But yeah, put a human face on it is always a good thing to do. So it does help people remember and relate.
So you're suggesting to have the story component both at the beginning and end of the presentation.
Yes, yeah. And again, it will help people remember the content that would otherwise be harder to remember. Okay, Mona.
Okay. So, I shared, I know people have to leave, so it's totally fine. I can keep on talking to myself. I shared that I was going to talk about this with my boss because person asked about how it was going, and I said, yeah, we're doing this big thing at the end, and this is what I'm going to talk about because I was approached by a coworker, and her body language showed no interest, right? And I kind of wasn't surprised. So I felt for a moment, I could feel my body getting really anxious, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, am I making a mistake? Was she hoping that I was going to do something obviously like on my work or like topic wise? And I realized that I just feel obviously a little bit more like quote unquote comfortable speaking about this right now. And so I'm not going to change it, but it gave me a little bit of anxiety and like tested my confidence, just even sharing it with this person. So I just have to know that like, it's okay if I share with my audience, my story. I'm not going to expect them to have obviously like the same emotional reaction as I might think, not that I hope that they will, but I know that they'll have their own. But it did test like, I think it just kind of showed like maybe, this is just a topic that we don't obviously like talk about. It just proved that point. So I just say that because I feel like my aha moment is the way that once I left the relationship, I was able to, I was able to see like through a different lens that I was the emotional and financial ATM to this person that I trusted, and that in turn gave me space and breath to capture moments with my camera that I was then able to share, like eventually share online. And so even if that is my aha moment at the end, I want to make sure that it, I guess, is that okay? It's not necessarily like an ask, but it's just more of, it's definitely an emotion. So that was my first thought. And then the hero piece, I'm not trying to convey that I'm the hero. More so, it's the acknowledgement and even trying to normalize patience and with the process and time. I think in this for me has been like my hero, and while I've had like amazing support, like I said before, it does feel very lonely. But I think sometimes part of that is just like accepting that and knowing that that I have everything that I need inside of me. So trying to like really find a way to say that as like in a hero's message, but just wanted to make sure it was okay.
I think
or makes sense in a way.
Yeah, I think a couple things to say about that. One is that your audience, we're not here to please all of our audience, and not everyone will actually be pleased. And that's okay. This is also one of my anxieties when I go out there and speak to people, because like I want everyone to like me and agree with me. But that's not like the kind of media I do is like political media. So like I on news shows and stuff. And like people are not going to agree with me. I'm taking a particular position. And for some reason it's still there, right? Or when I'm up on a stage, I want everyone to just be like enraptured. But they're not. They're on their phones. So that's not always going to happen. And this is hard in the Zoom world, but it's usually like I will look at the audience members who sometimes it's like, okay, I need to spice it up a little bit. But I'll often look at the audience members who are kind of giving me an anchor like that. Okay, yeah, and you, I'm getting it. The other thing to do with this is when you're worried about an audience like being like completely unresponsive, it's important that your anxiety isn't completely visible. People may just express themselves a little bit differently than you used to. And so it's still important to keep your body open, hands out like this, so that your anxiety isn't indicating to them that you're afraid that they're going to eat you alive, right? They may be paying attention, they may not be. Doesn't matter, because here you are, right? Here's what I'm going to say about the call to action. We say call to action at Convey a lot because our clients are all advocates or in politics or whatever. So call to action. Another way that you can think about it for this, is an invitation. Invite your audience to consider space, patience, how your freedom, how they might be able to relate to how you found freedom, or invite them to just like have an emotion with you. So if it's easier to think about like, this isn't a call to action, I'm talking about like the shit that happened to me and how I found my path out. It could just be an invitation for like, hey, walk with me on this path for a little bit. Take a look. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for once again allowing us to go a little bit over. By this point, I imagine whoever your next is, maybe isn't even expecting it. So here are some things you can do. Record yourself. If you like, you can submit it to us. Even if you don't submit it to us for our feedback, even if you don't submit it to us, please do record yourself, and then just kind of like, at the very least, to keep time, right? To see how long it is and to see how you can cut it. We got a really great tip from somebody. Google Documents, for some of your versions of Google Docs, will actually transcribe what you're saying as you say it. So it's called Google
voice something.
Yeah. So
but it's only in Chrome, because I opened 3 different browsers and it only works in Chrome.
So if you're using Chrome,
yeah,
which I use. So while you're giving your speech and you're recording yourself, have the Google Doc on the background and it will actually transcribe everything. Really quick way to go. It's automatic transcription, so it's not going to be 99% even accurate, but it might be a useful tool for you so that once you see that you're over time, you have a recording of the things that you can cut.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our little trick, a technical trick for you. You can take that if you like and use it. It might not work, but we'll see. Okay. All right.
Just
We're
remember
over
to
time.
alert us if you want some feedback on your
Yes,
recording.
email us.
And feel free to upload to your file too, just for your own, for whatever reason. You can do that.
Thank you so much. I can't believe this is the second to last time I'm going to see you. Next time we see you, it's all going to be your final stand delivers. We're going to ask Tina to come join us. Ask your bosses. Ask your other bosses. It'll be a treat. So we'll see you again soon.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Thank you so much. And I
Thank
can't wait
you.
for
Bye. Thank you.
you got our email if you need us.
Thank you.